What would you do if, on Father's Day, your own daughter slapped you across the face and told you your ex-wife's new husband was a real dad? That's what happened to me. And yet, one sentence I spoke afterwards shattered her world and left her begging me for forgiveness. Before we begin, please like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and make sure to subscribe for more powerful stories like this. The knife stopped mid-slice when I heard the tone in her voice. I had been chopping carrots for my evening stew, the rhythmic tap of steel against the cutting board filling the small kitchen. Steam rose from the pot behind me, carrying the warm scent of chicken broth and thyme. My home in Riverside, Portland, was usually quiet that hour, just the ticking of the clock and the hum of the refrigerator, but the shrill ring of the phone cut through like a blade. Clara. Even before I picked it up, my shoulders tensed. My daughter's calls had grown rare over the years, and when they did come, her tone was often flat distant, like an obligation she couldn't escape. "Hi, Dad," she said. The words were there, but the warmth was gone. I clutched the receiver tighter. Maybe this would be different. Maybe she was calling to ask about my day the way daughters should. "Look," she continued, "I can come to this Father's Day thing of yours, but not for long." The carrots on the cutting board blurred before me. "Of course, Clara," I said, forcing cheer into my voice. "Even if it's just for a little while, I'd be glad to see you." "Right. Well, I'll drive over around noon on Sunday, but I can't stay past 3. I promised Mom and Victor I'd help at their garden party." The spoon in my hand stilled against the stew. Her mother's garden party, not my Father's Day. "That sounds nice," I said quietly. "I was thinking of making that roast you used to love, the one with the herb crust. Remember?" She chuckled, but there was no affection in it. "As long as it's not like that turkey you cooked in the 90s. That thing was dry as cardboard." I frowned. I had never cooked turkey for Father's Day. Not once. But correcting her would only create more distance. "Of course not," I said. "I'll make something special." Behind me, the broth bubbled, sending up clouds of steam. Suddenly the scent felt suffocating. "Dad," she added, her voice sharp now, "try to keep things light, okay? I don't want to spend the whole time talking about your problems." My problems. As if missing my daughter was just a complaint. "Absolutely," I said after counting to 3 the way my therapist had taught me. "It'll just be a nice, relaxing afternoon." "Great. Okay, I have to go. Victor's calling me for dinner." Victor, my ex-wife's new husband, the man who had slowly replaced me in every way that mattered. "Give my regards to your mother," I muttered, though the words tasted bitter. "We will see you Sunday, Dad." The line went dead before I could respond. I set the phone down on the counter, listening as the dial tone merged with the quiet bubbling of the stew. The carrots on the cutting board had begun to dry at the edges, half-chopped, abandoned, just like everything else in my life. 3 hours. That was what my daughter thought I was worth. I didn't touch the stew again that night. Instead, I found myself wandering into the living room, drawn by something I couldn't name. On the bottom shelf of my bookcase sat the old photo albums. My hand hovered before pulling out the oldest one, its leather cover worn soft from years of handling. Dust floated in the lamplight as I opened to a picture from 2018, our last real Christmas together. Margaret wore the red sweater I had bought her, and Clara stood between us with her arm draped over my shoulder. We looked happy. We looked whole. Before Victor. Before I lost my engineering job. Before the divorce papers with their coffee stains and cold signatures. I was 60 when the firm downsized me. Too old to start over. Too young to retire. The severance carried us for 8 months. After that, Margaret's patience dissolved. The long nights at her book club, the phone calls taken in hushed tones. Until one day she told me about Victor. "He makes me feel alive again," she had said. Alive. As though 32 years of marriage had been nothing more than a slow death. I flipped through the album again. Clara at 10 years old, her front teeth missing as she beamed beside the treehouse I had built her. Clara at 16, laughing despite herself at one of my bad jokes. Clara at 24, calling me for advice about her first real job, when had the trust begun to rust away. I closed the album, but not before one photo caught my eye. Clara at 7, chocolate ice cream smear across her cheek as she clung to my hand at the zoo. Her gap-toothed smile radiated pure trust. "You're my superhero daddy," she had whispered that day, her arms tight around my neck. Now she was giving 3 hours to a man she once called her whole world. I placed the photo gently on the coffee table and leaned back into my chair. The house creaked around me, a lonely orchestra of wood and silence. My hand reached for the shoebox under the sofa. Father's Day card she had made. Me as a child. Construction paper hearts. Bold letters in crayon. Best dad ever. Where had that little girl gone? My stew cooled in the kitchen, forgotten. My home felt like a museum of a family that no longer existed. And yet, despite the ache in my chest, I found myself whispering, 3 hours. I'll make them count. Saturday afternoon found me in my garden, knees pressed into the damp earth, pulling stubborn weeds with more frustration than care. The sun dipped low over Riverside, streaking the sky with gold, yet my mind was stuck replaying Clara's phone call. 3 hours. That's what I got. 3 hours of her time, my own daughter, while her real devotion seemed reserved for Margaret and Victor. The sharp slam of a car door startled me. My head jerked up, sweat stinging my eyes. Through the gap in the fence, I caught a flash of metallic silver paint. Clara's Audi. My heart jumped. She never came early. She never came unannounced. I stood quickly, wiping my soil-stained hands on a rag tucked in my pocket. By the time she strode up the walkway, her heels clicking against my cracked concrete, she looked every bit the successful professional. Portfolio case in one hand, sharp blazer pressed crisp. "Dad," she said, pausing at the step as her eyes swept over my grass-stained jeans and dirt-covered fingers. "We need to talk. Seriously." "Of course, sweetheart." I fumbled with my house key, suddenly aware of how shabby my front door looked beside her polished appearance. "Come in." In the living room, she spread her documents across my coffee table like battle plans. Pie charts, revenue projections, glossy mock-ups of websites. Her eyes sparkled with a kind of excitement I hadn't seen in years. "I've been developing something incredible, Dad," she began, tapping a colorful chart. "A digital consultancy for small businesses. Local shops, restaurants, family services. They're all struggling online. This is my chance to help them while building something sustainable." I leaned forward despite my confusion. My engineer's curiosity piqued. "That sounds promising, Clara. You've always had an eye for opportunities." "Exactly." She flipped to another page. "I've already lined up 3 potential clients. And if things go as planned, I'll be pulling in 6 figures within 18 months. Conservative estimates." The numbers swam before my eyes. Monthly recurring revenue, acquisition costs, profit margins. It was a language foreign to me, but her confidence was undeniable. "This is impressive," I admitted, tracing an upward line on her chart. "Really impressive. But what does this have to do with?" "I need $100,000 for startup capital." The words hit me harder than any slap could have. My coffee cup trembled in my hands, liquid sloshing dangerously. I set it down carefully, buying myself a moment to process. 100? My voice trailed off. "Yes." She leaned in, her voice urgent. "Office lease, professional equipment, initial marketing budget, incorporation costs. I've calculated everything down to the penny." I tried to swallow against the dryness in my throat. "Clara, that's a significant investment." "I know." She nodded quickly, sliding another page toward me. "But this isn't fantasy. I've run every scenario. Break even by month 14, full profitability by month 20. These aren't dreams, Dad. They're projections based on real research." Her eyes glowed with anticipation, with faith in my ability to deliver miracles the way fathers are supposed to. "Have you approached banks? Maybe a small business loan." She waved her hand. "Banks want collateral I don't have. They're slow, conservative, and they never move fast enough. But family is different. The family believes in you." Family. As though I had the resources of the Rockefellers hidden in my modest home. "Dad," she continued, voice tightening with urgency, "this opportunity won't wait. Another firm is already sniffing around the same market. If I don't move now, I'll lose everything I've worked for. Her gaze pinned me. Behind it, I saw the little girl who once begged me to check under her bed for monsters. But now, the monster wasn't imaginary. It was a $100,000 chasm I could never hope to fill. I'll try to figure something out, I whispered. Her smile lit the room like sunlight breaking through clouds. I knew you'd come through. You always do. She gathered her papers quickly, slipping them back into her sleek case. I'll need to know by Sunday. Monday at the latest. She stood, adjusting her blazer with brisk precision. The office space I found won't stay available long. Sunday, Father's Day. The cruel irony wasn't lost on me. I walked her to the door, my dirt-stained hands fumbling with politeness while my chest felt hollow. She turned to the driver's side of her car and waved, her face radiant with certainty that I would make this impossible thing happen. The Audi purred away, leaving silence in its wake. I stood on the porch clutching her glossy charts, their neat numbers glaring up at me like accusations. $100,000. I had promised my daughter the moon when I could barely afford a candle. The house seemed smaller when I walked back inside, her documents heavy in my hands. My office was a little more than a converted bedroom, but I sat at the wooden desk and opened my worn filing cabinet. Banking, savings, retirement. Every account balance was etched into my brain, but I checked again. $25,000. That's all I had. 5 years of penny pinching since the divorce. 5 years of living small, eating alone, sacrificing quietly to build something resembling stability. 75,000 short. I rubbed my temples as the late afternoon light streamed through the blinds. The air felt thick, pressing down on me. Clara's hopeful face hovered in my mind, colliding with the brutal math. I could sell the house, my car, my father's watch collection. Even then, I would fall short. The numbers didn't lie. Yet I had promised her I would figure something out, and on Father's Day, I would have her deliver the truth. Truth wrapped not in zeros and checks, but in love, sacrifice, and a secret I had carried for 33 years. Sleep eluded me that night. I lay awake in the dark, listening to the creaks of the old house, the whisper wind to the cedar trees outside, and the steady ticking of the clock. Each tick was another reminder. I had 3 days to find $100,000. By dawn, I was already at my kitchen table, a pad of yellow legal paper before me, numbers scrawled in uneven rows. Coffee cooled in my mug, untouched. No matter how many times I added and subtracted, the outcome was the same. I had $25,000. Clara needed 4 times that. But I couldn't give up, not when she had looked at me with those shining eyes, filled with belief that I would come through. At 9 sharp, I walked into First National Bank in downtown Portland. The young loan officer greeted me with professional courtesy, her smile polite but detached. I handed over my paperwork, statements, account summaries, proof of pension. She examined them carefully, then looked back at me with sympathetic eyes. Mr. Harrington, your credit is adequate, but without steady employment income, unsecured loans of this size are nearly impossible to approve. A home equity line might be an option, but even expedited, it would take 3 to 4 weeks for processing. 3 to 4 weeks. Clara had given me 3 days. What about retirement withdrawal? I asked, though I already dreaded the answer. You'd be facing significant penalties and taxes. And even then, it may not be enough. Her words landed like blows. I nodded, gathered my papers, and walked out into the cool Portland air. The world bustled around me. Commuters, cyclists, students carrying laptops. Everyone seemed to have a place, a purpose. Everyone except me. By mid-morning, I was sitting across from Jerry, an old colleague from the engineering firm. We'd worked together for 15 years before the layoff scattered us like autumn leaves. He stirred his coffee nervously, avoiding my eyes. Sam, I'd help if I could, he said finally. But Sarah's medical bills from last year drained us dry. I might be able to lend you $2,000, maybe $3 if I stretch. I smiled weakly. $2,000 was generous, but it was like tossing a teacup of water at a forest fire. Still, I thank him sincerely. At least he offered what he could. The drive across town to Mike's house took 40 minutes. Mike had been my college roommate, the best man at my wedding to Margaret. If anyone would understand, I thought it would be him. We sat in his living room, surrounded by framed photos of grandchildren I'd never met. I laid out Clara's situation, my voice trembling as I confessed the impossible request. He rubbed his jaw thoughtfully. $5,000, he said at last. That's what I can realistically manage, but I'd need a couple of weeks to free up some investments. 2 weeks. Another impossible timeline. I wish I could do more, Sam, he added gently. But maybe Clara needs to start smaller. Work her way up. Start smaller. If only Clara thought that way. By afternoon, desperation drove me to a place I never imagined I'd step foot in. An antique shop on Burnside Street. The air inside smelled of dust and forgotten lives. I laid out my offerings on the counter. Margaret's old jewelry box, my father's watches, the china set we had used for our first Thanksgiving as a family. The shopkeeper, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses, examined each piece with detached efficiency. The pearls are cultured, not natural. 400 at best. The Timex watches? Maybe 600, assuming the mechanisms still tick. China, though, nearly 2,000 if you sell it as a full set. I felt my throat tighten. Memories flickered as he spoke. Margaret's laughter at that first Thanksgiving. My father's hand adjusting one of those watches. The nights I'd seen Clara play with her mother's jewelry box as a child. Total? I asked quietly. Maybe 5,000 if you're patient, he said. 3 if you want cash today. I left with my items still in my bag. Some prices were simply too high to pay. By evening, I pulled into my driveway, exhausted, my mind numb from rejections and half-answers. The calculations ran through me one last time. Savings, $25,000. Jerry's offer, $2,000. Mike's promise, $5,000. Antiques, maybe $5,000 if I let them go. Maximum total, $37,000. Still $63,000 short. I sat in my car with calculator resting in my lap, staring at the numbers as the last light of day bled out of the sky. My house loomed ahead, once a haven, now a reminder of every failure. No matter how many favors I called in, no matter how much I sold, I could never reach her target. And yet, Clara believed I could. I closed my eyes, hands gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles whitened. Tomorrow was Sunday, Father's Day, and I would have to face her, not with $100,000, but with the truth I had carried for 33 years. A truth that would cut deeper than any check ever could. Sunday morning dawned gray and cool, the kind of Portland sky that promised rain without delivering it. I had been up since 5, polishing the good china, ironing the tablecloth, and cooking Clara's childhood favorites, garlic mashed potatoes, green bean casserole, and the chocolate chip cookies she once helped me bake. I moved around the kitchen with a soldier's precision, every step calculated, every detail rehearsed. My plan was simple. Give her the best Father's Day meal I could manage, and then tell her the truth about the money. Tell her I couldn't provide what she asked for. Tell her, maybe, what I'd been holding back for 33 years. By 11:30, the turkey was carved, the table set for 2. 2 glasses, 2 plates, 2 spoons. The house was silent, except for the grandfather clock in the hallway, marking the seconds of my anxious wait. At noon exactly, the doorbell rang. I wiped my hands on the towel looped through my belt and forced a smile. 3 hours. That's all I had. 3 hours to remind her who I was, who I'd always been. But when I opened the door, the world tilted. Clara stood in the center, radiant as always in her crisp summer dress. But she was not alone. On her right was Margaret, my ex-wife, holding her purse like a shield. And on Clara's left, taller than both of them, stood Victor Langford, the man who had replaced me. Surprise, Dad, Clara said brightly. I brought Mom and Victor. Isn't this wonderful? All my family together for Father's Day. Her family. The words sliced through me. I stumbled backward a step, the polite smile frozen on my face. Oh, I see. Well, come in. They filed past me into the house. Victor's polished leather shoes clicked against my worn hardwood floors as he surveyed the place with a realtor's eye. Margaret offered a half-smile that carried more apology than joy. Clara, oblivious of the tension, twirled once in the living room. "Isn't this perfect?" she said, arms outstretched. Perfect. That was not the word. The dining table I had set so carefully for two now looked pathetic, inadequate for four. I hurried to fetch extra plates, my hands trembling as I rearranged the table settings. Victor didn't wait for an invitation. He slid into my usual seat, the head of the table, leaning back like a king surveying his throne. Clara sat beside him. Margaret perched across, leaving me the only remaining chair, at the foot of my own table. The hierarchy was established before a single bite was taken. "This turkey smells wonderful," Margaret said, her tone polite but distant. Victor carved his portion with surgical precision. "A bit dry," he remarked after a bite, "but not bad for home cooking. Most people overcook poultry without the proper equipment." I swallowed hard. I managed fine. My voice sounded defensive even to me. Clara smiled awkwardly. "Dad always makes the best holiday meals, right, Mom? Remember your chestnut stuffing." "Yes." Margaret jumped in, eager to smooth things over. "That was wonderful." Victor reached for the salt without asking, his arm brushing against me as though I were invisible. "Details matter," he said casually, "but sometimes it's more efficient to delegate. Professional catering, for instance, frees up time for more important things. More important things than a father cooking for his daughter." The implication was clear. As we ate, Victor's eyes roamed the dining room like an appraiser cataloging flaws. "Curious how you manage such a large house alone, Samuel," he mused. "Must be quite the burden. Heating, maintenance, property taxes." "It's not that large," I said stiffly. "Just right for one person." "Still," he said, swirling his water as though it were fine wine, "downsizing could be a wise choice. Economic efficiency, you know." Clara laughed lightly. "Victor's always thinking about optimization. It's what makes him so successful." Her words landed like stones. Successful, unlike her father. By dessert, I was fighting to keep my composure. Clara fetched coffee and the store-bought pie I'd tucked in the freezer. Victor leaned back in my chair, comfortably settled in the role of patriarch. Margaret tried to keep conversation light, but the current beneath the surface pulled us all into its undertow. Clara checked her watch with satisfaction. This is exactly what I wanted. All my parents together. Parents. The word was a knife. I forced a smile, though my heart pounded. It was only a matter of time before she brought up the money. And now, she would do it in front of Margaret and Victor. I wasn't just going to disappoint my daughter. I was going to do it with my ex-wife and her new husband watching. The room grew smaller. The coffee tasted bitter. And my secret, the one I had buried for decades, pressed against my ribs, demanding to be heard. Father's Day had become a battlefield, and the war had only just begun. The air inside my dining room felt thick, like the walls themselves were pressing in on me. Clara's laughter floated across the table as she scrolled through her phone. Margaret filled the silence with polite observations, and Victor reclined in my chair like a man settling into permanent ownership. I tried to focus on the coffee in my hand, but each sip turned bitter on my tongue. I could feel it, the shift in Clara's energy. She was winding up to the real reason she had come. "So," she said at last, her phone sliding back into her purse, "I wanted to talk about the business plan." There it was, the hammer poised above me. Margaret stiffened slightly, her fingers tightening around her coffee cup. Victor raised an eyebrow with faint curiosity, as though he had already read this script. Clara leaned forward, eyes bright. "Dad, I showed you projections. You said you'd figure something out. Do you have an answer?" The words hit me like cold water. I set my cup down carefully, afraid my hands might betray their tremor. "Clara!" "Sweetheart, I've run the numbers. I tried the bank. I spoke with old friends. I even considered selling some family things. But I can't raise what you're asking. not all of it. Her face shifted instantly, from eager anticipation to a mask of disappointment so sharp it cut me. How much then? She pressed. Her tone clipped. I swallowed hard. I have 25,000. That's everything I can give you. The silence that followed was deafening. Margaret's eyes darted between us. Her lips parted as though to speak, but Victor beat her to it. With a measured smile, he reached into his jacket pocket. Well, Clara, it's a good thing not everyone is constrained by such limits. The rustle of paper filled the room as he produced a check, folded neatly, and laid it on the table with a flourish. Even upside down, the amount glared up at me. $100,000. Clara gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. Victor? He leaned back, satisfied. Consider it an investment in your future. No strings attached. She stood so fast her chair scraped against the floor. In 2 quick steps, she threw her arms around his neck. Thank you, Dad, she whispered, her voice breaking with joy. You're such a real father. A real father. The words punched the air out of my lungs. 33 years of scraped knees, bedtime stories, graduations, tears and laughter, all erased in a breath. My throat constricted, but the words tumbled out anyway, pathetic in their smallness. I have 25,000. Clara froze. Slowly, she turned toward me, her joy melting into something far colder. A sharp laugh burst from her lips, brittle and cruel. That's it? That's what 33 years of fatherhood adds up to? 25,000. Clara, I began. You don't understand. But she was already moving, her steps deliberate, her eyes blazing with years of unspoken resentment. You never loved me, she spat. If you did, you'd find a way like he does. She jabbed a finger toward Victor. He proves it every day while you sit here in the sad little house, counting pennies. Her words seared hotter than any flame. Clara, please. The slap came before I could finish. A crack echoed through the room, sharp and final. My head snapped sideways from the force, a metallic taste filling my mouth where my tooth caught my lip. The coffee cup overturned, staining the tablecloth with a spreading brown blotch. For a moment, the world stood still. Margaret gasped, her hand covering her mouth. Victor's smug composure faltered, shock flickering across his features. And Clara, my daughter, stood trembling, her chest heaving, her palms still tingling from the strike. I reached for my napkin slowly, deliberately, and dabbed the blood at the corner of my mouth. The fabric came away red. Evidence. 33 years of love, erased in a single gesture. But as the heat spread across my cheek, something shifted deep inside me. The blow had not broken me, it had freed me. The weight I had carried for decades pressed against my chest, demanding release. Clara thought she had finished me. Instead, she had given me the strength to finally speak the one truth I had buried all her life. I rose to my full height, steady despite the sting. My daughter glared back at me, still defiant, still convinced she had won. You're right, Clara, I said quietly, my voice steady now. I'm not your real father. Her expression faltered, confusion replacing rage. What are you talking about? Margaret's eyes widened, tears welling instantly as she realized what was coming. Victor shifted uncomfortably in my chair, the smugness draining from his face. I let the silence linger for a heartbeat longer, watching Clara's fury falter into doubt. And then, with the calm precision of an engineer, I spoke the words that would shatter everything she thought she knew. You weren't born my daughter. You were chosen. The silence that followed my words pressed heavy on the room. You weren't born my daughter. You were chosen. Clara blinked, her anger faltering into confusion. What? Her voice cracked, small and uncertain. What do you mean? I drew a breath, my hand steady now on the back of the chair. Margaret and I adopted you when you were 2 years old. You came from an orphanage. You clung to a stuffed rabbit that had seen better days, and from the moment I held you, you were mine. Clara staggered back a step, as though the air itself had struck her. No, that's not true. You're lying. She turned desperately to Margaret. Mom, Tell him he's lying. Margaret's tears had already broken free, sliding down her cheeks. She shook her head slowly, her lips trembling. It's true, sweetheart. We always meant to tell you. But the years passed, and it never felt like the right time. Clara's knees buckled. She collapsed against the wall, sliding down until she sat on the floor, her elegant dress wrinkling beneath her. Her hands trembled as they covered her mouth. All this time, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Victor sat frozen in my chair, his smug confidence gone. His eyes darted between us, finally realizing he had stepped into a story much bigger than himself. I knelt beside Clara, ignoring the ache in my knees, and looked into her stricken face. For 33 years, I have been your father by choice, not by accident of blood. Every scraped knee I bandaged, every nightmare I chased away, every school play I sat through, every time I told you I believed in you, none of that was required. I chose you, every single day. She lifted her tear-streaked face, eyes wide with shock. But Victor just gave me everything I asked for. Money, opportunity. Doesn't that make him? Money? I interrupted softly. I gestured toward the check still lying on the table, its neat zeros looking almost absurd in the heavy silence. He gave you money. I gave you a life. I gave you a name. I gave you a family. I gave you 33 years of devotion that no check will ever match. Her lips trembled. You knew. All this time, you knew I wasn't yours. You were never not mine, I said, my voice firm now. You became my blood the day I signed those papers. Love is what makes family, not biology, not money. Love. Margaret finally moved closer, her hand hovering helplessly near Clara's shoulder. We thought about telling you so many times, especially after the divorce. But you were already hurting, and we didn't want to add more pain. Clara shook her head, tears falling freely. And all those times I doubted you, compared you to him. She turned toward me again, her voice breaking. I struck the man who saved me from an orphanage. I. Her words dissolved into sobs. I reached out, resting a hand gently against her cheek, the same cheek that moments before had burned with defiance. I let you hit me, I whispered, because I wanted you to understand the difference between a real father and a biological accident. Victor became your mother's husband. I became your father long before you knew what the word meant. Her hand rose to cover mine, trembling. Dad, the word came out raw, wounded, but real, weighted with new meaning. For the first time in years, she said it like she understood it. Margaret's tears fell faster, her voice breaking. Samuel, she needs to know she was always yours. Always. Victor shifted uncomfortably, clearly out of his depth. He cleared his throat, his usual composure gone. I didn't know, he admitted, voice low. Clara never mentioned. Because she didn't know, I replied simply. Clara clutched my hand like it was the only solid thing in a world that had suddenly collapsed around her. You chose me, she whispered through sobs. Every single day. Every single day. I confirmed. The room was quiet except for Clara's crying and the faint tick of the clock in the hallway. Even Victor, stripped of his bravado, sat in silence, his grand gesture meaningless now. 33 years of love had finally spoken louder than money. And for the first time in a long time, I felt the smallest spark of hope that my daughter might truly see me again. Clara's sobs shook her body as she clutched my hand, her polished veneer crumbling into the little girl I had once carried on my shoulders through the zoo. The woman who had called me a failure minutes earlier now looked at me with the raw eyes of a child discovering the truth about her own life. Her fingers traced a red mark on my cheek, the mark her hand had left. You let me hit you, she whispered. You let me say those awful things. And all the while, you were the one who saved me. I smoothed a strand of hair from her damp face, my voice low but steady. You've always been my daughter, Clara. Even when you forgot, even when you doubted, even when you thought money made a man a father. You were mine from the moment I held you. Her tears came harder. Forgive me, Dad. Please. I compared you to him like love was a transaction. I didn't see what you gave me. All the nights you stayed awake with me, all the sacrifices you made, all the years you believed in me when no one else did. I pulled her into my arms, ignoring the stiffness of my old joints, holding her the way I had when she was 5 and afraid of the dark. There's nothing to forgive, I murmured. Being your father means loving you, even when you forget who we are to each other. Behind us, Margaret pressed a hand to her lips, silent tears streaming. For the first time in years, she looked at me not with disdain or distance, but with quiet recognition. A faint nod passed between us, an acknowledgement of the truth neither of us had spoken until today. Victor shifted in his seat, the check still sitting untouched on the table. The weight of his wealth seemed suddenly small in the shadow of the moment unfolding before him. For once, he had no clever remark, no smug smile. He looked like a man out of place, humbled by the depth of something money could never buy. Clara pulled back just enough to meet my eyes. Her voice cracked, but the words carried a new weight. You're my real father, my only father, not because of blood, but because you chose me every day. The words cut through the ache in my chest like light, breaking through clouds. For the first time in years, she saw me, not as an obligation, not as the man her mother left behind, but as the father I had always been. I kissed the top of her head, my throat tightening. Happy Father's Day, sweetheart, I whispered. Her arms tightened around me. Happy Father's Day, Dad. Later, when Margaret and Victor excused themselves, Clara lingered by the door. She hugged me again, longer this time, her head pressed against my shoulder. We have so much to rebuild, she admitted softly. But I want to try. I don't care about the business plan right now. I just want us. We have time, I said gently. That's what family gives you. Time to get it wrong, and time to make it right again. She smiled through her tears. Thank you for choosing me. When the door finally closed behind her, the house no longer felt empty. The silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was peaceful. I gathered the dishes slowly, the red coffee stains still marring the tablecloth, a permanent reminder of the day everything nearly broke and then began to heal. The check Victor had left sat forgotten on the table, its crisp zeros meaningless now. I left it there, untouched, because today I had been given something no money could ever buy. The sound of my daughter's voice calling me Dad, not out of duty, but out of love. You know, sometimes a story waits inside us for decades, sealed away like a letter we're too afraid to send. I carried mine for 33 years, tucked behind silence and sacrifice, hidden in the creases of old photographs and the weight of forgotten Father's Day cards. And tonight I let it breathe. I tell it now because time has taught me something. Secrets don't wither when buried. They grow roots, and those roots can crack the foundation of even the strongest home. But when you pull them into the light, when you dare to speak them aloud, they stop being chains. They become seeds. If you are listening to me, perhaps with your own scars, your own betrayals, your own quiet heartbreak, I want you to know this. You're not defined by who left you or by the hands that struck you or by the voices that told you that you were not enough. You are defined by the love you choose to give, even when it is not returned the way you hoped. That is legacy. That is strength. I share this not for pity, but for connection. Because maybe, just maybe, someone out there needed to be reminded that chosen love is as real. No, even more real than the kind written in blood. So if my story touched you, I ask only this. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Share it so another wandering soul might find comfort. And please subscribe so these stories of survival, of truth, of quiet rebirth can keep traveling beyond me. As for me, I am not the same man who began this tale. That slap, that revelation, that moment of collapse and healing, it changed me. The name you knew, the man weighed down by silence, he's gone. What remains is a grandfather with peace in his chest and hope in his bones. So I'll leave you with this. Even when the pages of your story feel torn and smudged, even when the ink runs, you can still turn the sheet, still begin again. This is Samuel Harrington, and this is the sound of a chapter closing.